Okay, everyone. My name is Linda Panachi, and I'm a graduate student researcher here at the University of British Columbia, Okanagan. I'm working with the Persuasive and Social Computing Lab, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to this session on accessing Alliance RAC resources for researchers. It's part of the Digital Research Infrastructure Workshop series under the EDIA Champions program. Now, what is the Alliance? Digital Research Alliance of Canada, commonly referred to as the Alliance and previously referred to as Compute Canada, is an organization that provides advanced research computing, data management, and research software services to researchers across Canada. And the Alliance is actually known for supporting the country's ecosystem by providing or ensuring that researchers have access to tools, technologies, and expertise that are necessary for their innovative and impactful research. So, if you're a researcher, you're just starting out and you're looking for tools or technologies that could be very useful, the Alliance has got you. The Alliance is where you need to check for these tools and technologies. Now, as part of this workshop series, we'll be providing parts or guides on how to access these RAC resources and also videos in on Python data analysis and training large language models, fine-tuning large language models using resources that are provided by the Alliance. If you want this kind of content, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this video. Thank you. Now, as part of the table of content for this video, we'll be looking at ARC resources, eligibility requirements, pre-submission consultations, peer review, and also how to create an account on the Alliance, and finally, resources for RPP and RLG. Stay tuned. Now, these are useful links for RAC resources, right? These links would help you better understand the RAC application guide and frequently asked questions. Also, give you an overview of the competition results so you know what to expect. And they will be provided in the video description below. Now, let's take a look at ARC resources and how you can actually access them. So, there are two ways in which a researcher can access advanced computing resources on the Digital Research Alliance of Canada. And these two ways are through the Rapid Access Service and the Resource Allocation Competition. Now, the Rapid Access Service, let's talk about this. Let's dive in. Now, this service is actually designed for small, immediate computational and storage needs, and it's ideal for projects that don't require competitive application process. So if you need a quick access to resources for your project, let's say you're running a preliminary research or you're running test simulations or you're conducting small scale data analysis, the RAS might be what you need. It's also great for researchers who are just getting started and want to experiment with infrastructure before applying for larger locations. So if you need if you have immediate or small scale needs, the RAS would be a great starting point. Now, the research allocation competition is different from the RAS. Now, this is a complete competitive application process, and it's actually ideal for people with or researchers with larger, more intensive, resource-intensive projects, and it also caters to researchers who need dedicated resources for a long period of time. So, for example, if you have projects that require large volumes of storage for data sets, or they're computationally heavy or computationally heavy research, like maybe advanced simulation or AI model training. And this research requires or demands dedicated CPU and GPU resources. The RAC is your go-to. I'm going to explain the RAC under the research platform and portals and the research resource for research groups. Okay, so we've talked about the RAS being for small, immediate needs, but what resources, are actually available under the RAS? So now the RAS has a cluster, it has project storage, it has nearline storage. So what is a cluster? A cluster is a shared environment or they're shared environments where your resources are located based on availability. So these clusters are available for different computational workloads. And for this, we have the Cedar, Gram, Beluga, and Naval. There's also the Niagara and HPSS cluster. For the RAS, you might want to use the Cedar, Gram, Beluga, or Naval cluster. Now, for project storage, the project storage provides you with a space to store your active research data. Now, while this is limited under the RAS to maximum of 40 terabytes, right, it's actually ideal for short-term data needs. For the nearline storage is a more cost-effective option. So if it's actually great if you're looking to archive your data, but you still need the data occasionally, and the maximum here is 100 terabytes. For the Niagara and HPSS cluster, the RAS storage is not available for these two, but under the remaining four, yeah, it's available. Now, while some storage resources are actually available by default, you may need more, as your research progresses. So, say you are working and you suddenly discover that actually need more than maybe maximum of 40 terabytes. Let's say you need more than that for your project, right? What do? You simply email support@tech.alliancecan.ca with a clear justification explaining why you need additional storage. You need to be specific about the type of data, and how that aligns with your research goals, right? So let's not forget that the default storage resources are automatically provided. This means that once you create your Alliance account in the CCDB, the PIs, or the principal investigator, we're going to talk about this in subsequent slide and how to also create the Alliance account. I'll walk you through that process. They're given access to storage by default, right? So if more is needed, you can always request for more. I'll place this email also in the video description. Now, let's talk about the resource allocation competition. Now, the resource allocation competition is actually provided by the Digital Research Alliance of Canada, and this is to ensure that resources are allocated effectively. And there are actually different eligibility criteria, and we'll run through this. But what is, two platforms or two things that are available under the RAC? And these are the research platform and portals and the resources for research group. So what is the research platform and portals? Now, these are tools, services, and online environment that are designed to support researchers in conducting their work efficiently. Now, the IRPP is actually a peer-reviewed application, and what it does is it provides you gateway to these tools. Right? It provides a gateway to these tools and services that I just mentioned. And accessibility, it's actually meant for broad user use across different disciplines, and you don't really require a lot of technical expertise to get started. Now, example is the Federated Research Data Repository. And what this does is it provides you with a platform for storing, sharing, and discovering research data sets. So if you really need access to such platforms, you would need to go through the RPP. Another example could be the Open Science Framework, which is a tool for managing research workflows, collaboration, and sharing, which is the OSF. Now, this is also provided via the RPP. There's also the Research Software Portal. Now, the Research Software Portal is really great because it contains different curated research software tools and applications. For example, recently I was able to access the named entity recognition software on the research software portal from the Alliance, which was really great and which is also actively being used for my project. So this can be accessed, via the RPP peer-reviewed application. Now, the platform is generally designed to address common research challenges. So managing data sets, specific type of analysis, or maybe focus on, usability and accessibility, you need to go through the RPP. But if your project's primary need is to use maybe compute resources on a cluster, you need to go through the RRG. Now, what is the RRG? The RRG is also a peer-reviewed application, but it's actually designed to focus on conducting research, and you have access to compute resources, storage resources, and cloud resources. Now, the compute resources are for tasks such as large-scale simulations, data analysis, complex computations, and resources like your Graham, Cedar, these clusters, they're also provided via the compute resources. We also have cloud resources, and this it's provides flexible computing environment for tasks that require dynamic resource allocation. There's also the storage resources to secure and store large data sets. Now, for the IRG, if you're going to be running computationally heavy projects or research, you're going to actually require the IRG. I know because recently in the lab, we've had to work with large language models, and they're actually computationally heavy and they take a lot of time. So the RAS might not be enough, but the IRG would be enough for such projects. Now, let's walk through the application process of the IRG and the RPP, right? Okay, so for new applications, there's a regular round. So if this is great if you're working on short-term or exploratory projects. Now, the application actually goes through both scientific review and the technical review. Now, why does it go through a scientific review? This is to evaluate the importance and quality of your research, while the technical review is to ensure that your resource needs are actually realistic, right? And you would also need to submit a Canadian Common CV, your CCV, and this will help the reviewers understand your qualifications and experience. However, if you're a returning applicant, there's a multi-year process, and this can be or fast track. Now, this allows you to skip the heavy lifting. Why? Because you've already proven yourself with a strong track record, right? So what you need in this process is to submit a lightweight report. This is just enough to update the reviewers on your progress, on how far you've come. And for this, you don't need a CCV this time. The only review, in fact, in this case, is the technical review, because they'll just be confirming your resource needs and if they still meet your project needs. And your previous score is used. We'll also be talking about the scoring matrix much later in the video. Now to your RPP. Your RPP is the application process for both actually similar. For your RPP, you'd also be submitting a new application. If you're submitting a new application, this is also regular round, and you can request for resources for up to 3 years. Yes, 3 years, which is actually great for long-term projects that need sustained support. Now, you need to prepare a full application, and like the IRG, it goes through the technical and the scientific, it goes through a technical review and scientific review. Just like the IRG, you also need a Canadian Common CV to showcase your qualifications, your project leadership. And good news, you can actually delegate this application to a team member or to keep things, efficient. And for returning applicants, just like the IRG, you do not need to submit a full-scale application. You can actually submit a light weight report to update your progress. And the focus here is on only technical review to confirm that your resources are still needed, to confirm the resources that are still needed and the ones that are being used effectively. So we can see that these are two different application processes, although they are quite similar, but you need to decide what your project requirements will be before making these applications. So what is the eligibility and minimum request? So let's first look at key roles. I mentioned PI and the rest, so let's look at what we mean by this. So the PI is the principal investigator, right? The main person for the research, right? And the PI, there's certain things or criteria that makes one eligible, right? The PI must have an active Alliance account, and the PI requires an academic principal investigator role. This could be, they need to hold this role. This could be positions in the faculty, adjunct faculty, or librarian at a Canadian academic institution. Um, Why is this needed? Now, this is needed, or this ensures that the PI has the requisite academic standing and institutional support to lead the research. So this is really important. Then there's the co-principal investigator, the co-PI. The co-PI must also be a Canadian faculty member directly involved in the project. And a Canadian Common CV is required. And this is mandatory because it provides, standardized format for presenting the researchers' academic and professional accomplishments. Finally, what we need for, in the application is a collaborator. Now, your collaborator could typically be a non-Canadian researcher or, somebody holding a faculty position in a Canadian institution. And while the collaborator is there, collaborator can be mentioned in the application document, but cannot be listed as a co-PI. So you might wonder what are the minimum resource requests, right? For my project, what's the minimum, what's the maximum? Okay, so the CPU, if you're requesting CPU resources, right, that's the processing power you need. Computations, that's the processing power you need for your computations. Your request must be at the minimum of 200 core years for each cluster where you plan to use the CPU. Now, just think of it like this. If one CPU runs continuously, if one CPU core runs continuously for 1 year, that counts as 1 core year, right? So for large scale projects, you need to request resources that add up to at least 200 core years across your chosen clusters. So what if you need more memory per core, right? What if you need more memory? If a project requires a higher memory per core, for example, working with maybe big data or simulations, you can use something called the core equivalent years to calculate your request. Now, this is to ensure that the projects or whatever requirements are still in line or eligible. Now, if you're so confused about how to calculate what you need, you can always send an email to the email that I would link in the video description to me, ask your questions and you get a response right away. Now, about the GPU resources, the graphic processing units. Now, this is actually used for machine learning or deep learning or simulations that need parallel computation. For something like this, you would need the minimum request is 25 RGU years on each cluster where the GPU are needed. And the RGU stands for the reference GPU units. Now, it's actually a standard to compare the performance of different GPU models. Now, not all the GPUs are the same, so the RGU adjusts for differences in their computing power. What this means is that the NVIDIA A100, which is actually very powerful, it's actually very powerful GPU, equals to 4 RGU years. But something like the NVIDIA V100 16 gig. Now, this is actually equals to the 2.2 RGU. So there are different types of GPU. So you need to decide which you need for your project. Also, the minimum resource request is 41 terabytes, right? And unlike the CPU, where we said it applies to the CPU and the GPU for each CPU or GPU, this is not per individual cluster. This is the entire storage you are entitled to. You also have access to nearline storage, which we also mentioned. Now, if you calculate everything you need for your research project and everything you need is way below any of the minimum requests, you can always put in for the rapid access service. Now, let's talk about pre-submission consultations. So first off, I think pre-submission consultations are really great because it allows you prepare a very competitive application. So if you're a first-time applicant and you are in need of consultation, you are in luck because the Alliance provides pre-submission consultations where you have somebody go through your application and clarify the application requirements and process. You get to receive guidance on the technical aspects. It can actually enhance the quality and competitiveness of your application. The consultations for this year were held before October 25th, and it gave applicants enough time to receive consultations from the technical staff. And if you want to schedule a consultation, you can contact the Alliance support team via email at allocations@tech.alliancecan.ca to arrange a consultation. There's no need to worry. I'm going to place this email in the video description. Now let's talk about the peer review process. What happens after I submit my application? What happens? Okay, so what happens is a peer review process, and this is just a brief overview of what the peer review process looks like. What happens is first an administrative review, just a verification of the eligibility and completeness of your application, then a technical review to assess how feasible what you have requested for is in line with your project requirements, then a scientific review, evaluates the research merit, the impact, the alignment with different strategic properties, and finally a determination based on these reviews for available resources. Now, you have nothing to worry about because reviewers often comprises of experts in relevant fields, and there's always that strict adherence to confidentiality. And applicants receive feedback and notifications of the allocation decisions. Now let's run through the account creation. I'm going to show you how you can quickly create an account on the Alliance. Now, you need your institutional email, your sponsor information, your sponsor account, that's your PI account. And also the PI can needs all this information to also apply. So I'm just gonna skip this slide so that I can show you how to make your application. So this is what the the link takes you to. This is where the link takes you to. For this, you click on the terms of use. You click, you agree to the privacy and personal information protection policy. This is after reading it, of course. What this says is it defines who an account holder is, the PI, the co-PI. Basically, some of the things I already mentioned. I already mentioned earlier in the video. Yes. So then this tells you, oh, we're going to have consent to personal information, although this is kept private, but Alliance will have consent to informations that you submitted. For this, you click this. Now, this part's actually optional, but I always encourage that you click yes here because this tells you, this gives you news about what's happening to the clusters, if there's maintenance or if there's any information that you need to know. Then you click consent to access user data. Remember that you can withdraw your consent at any time for these last three. Then there's this optional transfer. In case the account is, deactivated, your data can actually be transferred, to your sponsor. Then you click submit. Now, because I already have an Alliance account, what I'm going to just show you what this will take you to. Have you ever applied for the Alliance account before? No. So you have the first time applicant, you click no, and then you're taken to something that looks like this. For this, you'd have to enter your given name, your family name, your pronouns, your institutional email. It's always advisable to use institutional email as they often have credibility. Then you can choose your preferred language if it's in French or in English. Your institution right here, your department, and then the position. If you're a PI, you can choose that and try to get your account before approving for any other group members in your team. Or if you're a sponsored user, you can choose any of these. If you're an undergraduate student, master student, or doctoral student, anyone which applies to you. Now, when you're done, you click on submit application. After clicking on submit application, you receive an email. If at any chance or at any point you do not receive a confirmation email, it's always advisable to contact accounts@tech.alliancecan.ca. Now, if you're the PI, the administrator will process your account request, and within 2 business days, you'll be approved. But if you're a group member, the sponsor would be, the sponsor, which is the PI, after being approved, will also approve you. Now, this is what it looks like, where you can then confirm, you get a mail to confirm this. It will carry all the details that you've entered, and then you can confirm your role. And from there, you have your Alliance account, where you can then have access to several resources. Now, because this part here is the RAS, this is actually non-competitive at this time. Yeah, so if you want to apply for the RPP and RRG, you'd have to submit a different, application. Although I'm going to place the template for that application in the video. All right, let's go back to our slide. So you've seen how to create an account, right? So this provides you access immediately to the RAS. And in subsequent videos, I'm going to show you how to submit a job on the RAS, on the ARC, available on the RAS, on the clusters. I'm going to show you several ways you can do analysis on the ARC and, subsequent videos. So if you're interested in content like this, please click the like button, share, and subscribe to this channel. So what resources, are there for the RPP and RRG? So this particular segment is to just give an overview of what to keep in mind when you're preparing your application for the RPP and RRG. So the research outline, what research will be conducted. You need to clearly describe and explain the objective and scope of your project. If you're working on a project to say, for example, to predict wildlife behavior, maybe using climate data, your expected outcome might be maybe a machine learning model capable of predicting accurate predictions for wildlife spread under different scenarios. You need to be specific. You need to make sure that your outcomes are directly tied to the computational resources you're requesting. For instance, if you're asking for 300, GPU hours, you need to explain how this will enable training of deep learning models that are crucial to achieving your results. So you need to explain what will be conducted, the scope of the project, the objectives of the project. Then if you're if it's for a tri-council funded project, you need to focus on describing the research activities planned. There's no need to justify the science again if it's already evaluated, but you need to focus on describing, what research activities, are planned. For example, if your project is analyzing, let's say an example would be maybe biodiversity, for example, of a given region, you might want to measure the success by the number of species identified and the accuracy of your classification algorithm. So you need to be specific and quantitative wherever possible. Now, clear metrics often strengthen your application and demonstrate that you have, plans for accessing your work. And also you need to adhere strictly to the page limit for the outline. I'm going to also add, the page limit for different applications in the video description. Now, so what are the expected outcomes? Clearly describe your expected outcomes. If you are requesting a large amount of storage, you need to explain how this aligns with managing maybe terabytes. If, for example, you're working on image data, right? So how would the storage that you're requesting for, how does it align with managing terabytes of image or genomic data that are required for your analysis? You need to also be clear with your outcomes, as it helps reviewers understand the necessity and feasibility of your request. You need to explain how the request or the results will be measured and how they will advance in the research field. So I think an example I should give for that would be, for example, you can say something like, using 100 core years of CPU, we conducted 50 simulations of climate models that provide new insights into regional rainfall patterns. Now, this is very specific. It shows the CPU. It talks about the CPU, how much was used. It talks about the simulations, and it also says exactly what was given. Now, you need to ensure that your outcomes align with the resources, requested. Now, if you're a returning applicant, you need to summarize the research that was conducted using what was previously, allocated to you. If there are any publications, you need to list that. If the utilization, for example, of resources was below the expectations, you need to provide explanations. If you were giving 100 core years and what you used was 50, you need to provide a rationale behind why this happened. Also, you need to justify the use of of tools, methods, and models in your project. Like if there were community algorithms, community codes, algorithms, or user developed scripts. For example, if you're using I think I do. Oh yeah. So if you're using a community code, like maybe TensorFlow, for example, for machine learning, you need to explain why these tools are suited for your research. You need to highlight features like maybe scalability, accuracy, and how that aligns with your research objectives. Also, if you're using user-developed script, you need to explain the purpose. For instance, you could say, our Python script optimizes the preprocessing of large genomic data sets, significantly reducing so and so. So this you need to provide justifications for every thing that you be using. You need to also explain post-processing or data analysis and how these are linked to your computational goals. And you also need to provide the duration and number of jobs for your allocation estimates. So these are just some resources or some tips that you could use when preparing your RPP and your RRG application. So if there are other computational resources that are available for the PI or copyright, you need to also mention this. And like I said earlier, you need to provide justification if your resource allocation is below, a particular resource utilization. Now let's go to the scoring matrix. Now this scoring matrix, so I did mention somewhere during the RPP and IRG application process that if you that as a returning applicant, previous score will be used. So this is what I meant by that. So once you peer review process is done, you're given a scoring matrix based on your application. So it actually has to be competitive. So the application, if it's excellent or good, you get a scoring matrix between 3.1 to 5.0, meaning that the application, it meets all relevant aspects of the review, like the review I mentioned earlier. And maybe certain improvements are possible. So we aim to have at least a fair to an excellent application. If your application has 1.1 to 1.0, 0.1 to 2.0 scoring, it means it's broad. And this is why I mentioned earlier that your applications must be specific. So this is all I have for this video. I hope it did give you a little bit of introduction into RAC. There's so much to, explain, so much to show with RAC, the ARC resources, what can be run on the ARC resources, and it also spans across several disciplines. Now, these are my references, and I would also place these references in the video description below because it will give you, access to the RAC resources. So thank you for joining this comprehensive overview of the resource allocation competition. Understanding this criteria is actually, essential for crafting successful and compelling application. So if you found any of the information in this video helpful, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to our channel for more insights into resource allocation processes. Don't forget to hit the notification bell to stay updated. We value your input. So if you have any questions at all, please leave comments, or you can send questions via the email. Now, best of luck with your applications. Remember that a well-prepared submission aligns with different scoring criteria. And for subsequent videos, we'll be taking a look at data analysis. We're taking a look at large language models. We're taking a look at how we can use different research softwares. So thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in our next video. Thank you. Bye.